This week, we're continuing our series on the Beatles albums, checking some variations of them, how they look, what they contain, talking a little bit about how they sound. And today we're specifically looking at the 8th studio album by the Beatles, released on the 26th of May 1967 in the UK and a few days later in the US, the first album to have the same track listing in the US and the UK, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Just said in the intro that this was released on the 26th of May 1967 in the UK, but in fact online there is a little bit of a debate over the actual date of release. Actually, the Beatles official website says that it was released on the 1st of June. From my understanding, from what I've read online, it actually was intended to be released countrywide in the UK on June 1st. From what I understand, it was released on June 2nd in the US, but there was a earlier release or partial release in some regions of the UK apparently on the 26th of May, and there are quite a few let's say statements, if you will, by people online, by fans at the time, saying that they bought the album on the 26th of May. Wikipedia also says 26th of May, but then, like I said, different sources online are claiming different dates. I choose to believe that actually there was a limited localized release on the 26th of May, and then on the 1st of June it was the official countrywide release in the UK, with the 2nd of June following in the US. Now, about the track listing, this was the first album to have the exact same track listing in both countries. Notably, even Revolver, which was starting to get closer to the UK track listing, still had some differences. This one, I think, kind of showed that the Beatles had reached a certain point of maturity and sort of ownership in their music, because at that moment they were able to impose on the labels how the track listing would look in any country, basically, or at least in these two main ones, right, where their albums were very successful, the UK and the US. And I think that this option for the Beatles to now be so big that they could control completely the content of what they were releasing worldwide, aside from the obvious quality of the album, it just was very successful, not only to the public but also critically, and it remained so decades after. I think this also contributed to its success and to the fact that it became such a staple album for not only popular pop rock music and the 60s music, but for music in general, at least from the 20th century. Now, I'll not spend more time talking about it. There are countless videos, documentaries online talking about this album. There are countless books. Maybe we'll have a separate video where we can talk more about it. I mentioned some of these things related to this album, that it was intended initially to be a concept album, but didn't really end up being as such. Has pieces of what can be considered a concept album, but not fully. It's actually a very eclectic collection of songs, if you think about it. So many styles and genres started to blend in, which actually is unique in itself. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking more about the album itself and the context around recording it. We'll rather look at some issues of it and reissues of it. But I did want to say that this was one of the albums that, like I said, was very successful from the beginning, but it was noticeable in the next decades, where different tops and sort of charts of best albums in history or most influential albums in history started to be built by different publications, most notably Rolling Stone, but in the internet years of the past 30 years, other outlets as well, or like just specialists or people talking about it online and elsewhere. This was always at the top of the charts of all of the albums. Sometimes it was considered to be the best album ever, sometimes it was in the top 10. It was definitely, from the Beatles' perspective, the best rated album in these kinds of charts. But in the past 20 years, I feel like there's been more of a balance in that sense, and we see albums like Abbey Road especially, but also the White Album and most recently Revolver, jumping in those kinds of charts, which for me is very good, because it shows that actually people as the decades went on, became more and more convinced of the quality and timelessness of the Beatles music, and didn't just focus that on one single album, because indeed through their discography as a group they had multiple albums that were excellent. That being said, let's get to actually looking at some records here. So now the first one that I wanted to look at today is this stereo reissue of Sgt. Pepper from 1980. Now this is interesting. This is part of the Beatles collection Blue Box BC13 box set that I have, the one from the UK that I got after the first one that I had from the Netherlands. And this box set is labeled on Discogs at least as being one that was issued in 1985, but in fact all of these box sets as of 1978 were not necessarily produced with all of their records in the same year, but rather the records were picked and sort of packaged in the box set from whatever stocks, I guess, EMI and its subsidiaries had left. This was also valid in other European countries, not just the UK. And so basically my box set appears 1985, but this record almost definitely is from 1980 because its matrices are -5-4, and in the box set that I have, technically speaking, or at least from the information that exists online, Discogs and elsewhere, I should have -6, I think, but anyway, a different matrix than this one. So I would assume that this was actually a 1980 record put in a 1985 box set, which wouldn't be very surprising. One of these days I'm going to do a double check of all of the records and try to find them. I put the matrices down on paper. I did a first search, but then I didn't bother really. I just thought, okay, this is early 1980s and that's it. But probably someday I will. Now, let's take a look at this as well. I'll take the record out first to show you the complete cover. As you can see, so I said 1980. This looks absolutely amazing. It looks pristine, and I hope it comes across on the camera. Very little sort of marks or even like dirt or things from, that can appear on these record sleeves with time. This was kept perfectly. Even if you look at the spine, and again, I hope you'll be able to see it. In case not, I'll try to do some B-roll later, and I'll include that when I edit the video. It looks quite clean, it looks nice, it's not bent at all, it doesn't have creases or anything like that. The back also looking excellent, bright red. And even the color, I mean, on the front, the coloring still quite bright, I would say. And of course, this was a fold out. I think this was, was it the second official Beatles UK album that was fold out? I think so. I think Beatles for Sale was the first one and this was the second one. I hope I'm not mistaken. I'm talking about studio albums, not compilations, of course. And this beautiful picture of the Beatles with the yellow background. And this also came in the box set that I got. It also came with the original cutout that people were supposed to, cut around and probably use as, I don't know, ornaments or something. I'm guessing very few people would actually do that, or maybe I'm mistaken, maybe some of them did. Now let's take a look at the record itself. I'm starting to package my records, at least Beatles ones and ones that I care more about, in these anti-static sleeves from Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab. They are a little bit better than the regular polyline sleeves, I find. And they do a little bit better with the static, just a little. And so, well, this one is not the case. So I took it out earlier to check some things out, and I didn't dust it properly before I put it back, so I will definitely do that later. But you can see the now well-known Parlophone label, silver on black, 2 EMI box, Parlophone label from the 80s. The disc, the record itself looks quite good, aside from the dust, then the sort of lint that was caught up by the static just now. It was, it's looking excellent, sounds excellent. What was interesting about this variation is that actually at the end of Day in the Life on the second side, it includes that high-pitched noise that is first heard when the song finishes, but then it doesn't include the loop with the weird sounds, that it was captured on the original release, and is supposed to keep your record or your needle in a loop repeating that sound. The sound is not there on the record. Not sure of the reason. Maybe they thought, like it was in the US, the US release, as far as I know, initially did not include that loop either. So maybe they thought they would just take it out for this pressing or these re-releases from the 80s. The second piece that I wanted to share today is this 1982 Japanese mono reissue of Sgt. Pepper. Mentioned before on the channel, just going to briefly mention it again. In 1982, Japan did a series of reissues on red vinyl for all of the mono albums of the Beatles, with excellent quality sound. This time it seemed like, versus what they were doing on the issues of Beatles albums over there in Japan, it seemed like they had minimal intervention on the sound of these albums versus the tapes that they were given. There was also said that they used the original UK master tapes. This also is put under doubt. There are still discussions and debates over it. Doesn't really matter, because the quality of the tape that they used was definitely excellent. These issues from 1982, and then there's a reissue series in 1986 using the same sources, are both quite excellent. I had a 1969 mono version of this album from the UK. It was a little bit used, so the pressing quality was good. The cover looked nice enough, but indeed I wasn't really happy with the sort of cleanliness of the sound. I know this maybe sounds bad to some vinyl fans out there, but there it is. But this one sounds excellent, and it also looks pristine, like the stereo one that I just showed you. You can see, of course, the quality of the picture is it's sharp. The colors are good. It seems a little bit darker in tone. The back looks excellent. Again, even on this one, there's very few spots here. Very faint spots of, like, time passing or whatever, but nothing exceptionally bad. The spine looks excellent to me, at least, and this is like very good hard cardboard stock. It's excellent quality, and it was kept pristine. And I see that Japanese collectors, you'll see this on the channel later as well, because I'll still keep doing videos, and I have some more Japanese records, Japanese issued records of the Beatles. Mostly the mono ones, which were, kept by their Japanese owners in excellent shape. This also has the LB strip, which is a staple for Japanese releases. Let's open it up as well to see a little bit of the inner picture again, right? The spread. Looking nice. Again, it seems like a little bit darker, the tone, and this one, it does have some spots here on the inside. I'm not sure if you can actually see them. Haven't yet tried to clean this up. I will probably try to do it, but I'm kind of afraid I will just do more damage, so maybe I'll leave it like that. And also, it seems like it's a little bit more darker, and sort of the quality of the picture, it does look like a copy, so it is a little bit blurry in places. Now, this one does not have like an opening on this gatefold part. This is sealed shut. The only opening is here where we have the record. This one does not have the cutout. Not sure if it was included actually in this. But what it does have is the Japanese style insert. This one with the songs and the lyrics in Japanese. Some albums did have them in English as well. But yeah, this looks quite good as well. It's quite well kept. And the record itself, again, mobile fidelity sleeve, red vinyl, translucent vinyl. This again looked excellent when I got it. It was amazing how well it was kept. The sound is really good. It sounds really, really silent as vinyl goes. With this, again, silver on black, but this time EMI Odeon label, typical for the 1980s. Just a beautiful, beautiful piece of vinyl, beautiful record, and a pleasure to listen to as well. And this one also contains the loop sound at the end of A Day in the Life. It's not in a loop. It's basically hearing that high-pitched noise, and then you hear that sound that was supposed to be looped, but you hear it only once, and then it just goes into the runout, but it is there. So yeah, these are the two analog versions of this album that I own, the 1980 stereo reissue from the UK, with Harry Moss's initials on the runout, and 1982 Japanese mono reissue on red vinyl. Now, before we move to the 2017 reissue, or actually new mix of Sgt. Pepper, I would first like to take a look at this record as well, again referencing the Beatles Box from Liverpool collection. This is record number 6, as you can see, and this contains a quite significant chunk of the Sgt. Pepper album, and I'm going to read through the track listing for you to know what is on here. Now, I also think that this 6th record in that collection is one of the best there, because it has this mashup between songs on Sgt. Pepper and songs from the Magical Mystery Tour EP, as well as the single All You Need Is Love. So it's kind of a very good compilation itself. Probably the only 2 things that we're missing from on here, and maybe a couple of the songs from the Magical Mystery Tour, or like the the B-side to All You Need Is Love, which is Baby You're a Rich Man, could have been replaced by the Strawberry Fields Forever Penny Lane single, because it was from the same overall period, but still a pretty strong record. You do have the back here with the track listing. You can see it for yourself, I hope. And then, of course, I'll just take the record out briefly with its original polyline sleeve. And it's again 2 EMI box Parlophone silver and black label from the 1980s. Now, looking excellent as well. So now, moving on to more recent years, we have, of course, the 2017 new mix of Sgt. Pepper, new stereo mix of Sgt. Pepper by Giles Martin, and this 2017 reissue. I still have it in the wrap, as you can see, with the hype sticker on. You can see it here as well, the anniversary edition, basically, of this album. So because it's like this, I will not open the gatefold. You've seen the gatefold a few times, so I think it's pointless to do so. But I will remove the record for us to look at it, because, of course, it has the replica or replication, or earlier or later, replica of the Parlophone yellow on black label from the original release of Sgt. Pepper. Record in a pretty good condition. To me, it's like it was pretty good quality, it seemed to me when I bought it. Silent vinyl, good sound, and a new mix that I do like, but I will have some mentions about it when we talk a little bit about the sound and a few of the songs on this album. Now, also worth mentioning is that this stereo issue has reproduced the original inner sleeve of Sgt. Pepper, which I don't have on any of the other copies. I had it on the 1969 UK mono that I gave away, but you see the reproduction of the sort of fiery sleeve, paper sleeve that they had on the original album, and as well it has the cutouts again. I will show them. Yeah, this cardboard with the cutouts, darker tint this time. And we also have this sort of insert talking about a little bit about the album. We have a foreword by Paul McCartney as well. I think part of this information exists in the deluxe edition. I think you can see it there with the CDs and the Blu-rays, where the book is, a huge book is, and I think most of this information probably will be there as well. And this was also something that was included in, I think I have it on one of the CDs of Sgt. Pepper, which is sort of this list, this sort of map to the figures that you see on the cover of the album, right? With the numbers and listing each person that you would see on the cover. So that concludes our vinyl section for this video. Let's move on to CDs. The first CD that I want us to look at is, of course, the 1987 first issue of Sgt. Pepper on CD. This is the European version. I'm not sure that this disc is from 87 itself. It might be from 88 or 89, but it's the same issue, in essence, the original stereo mix of the album. This actually came in a outer cardboard sleeve with the picture of the album and the red back as well. And this would slide into that. It was actually one of the few albums in that series that came like that. It's really weird, at least for me. Also, this one that I have does not have any booklet. It only has this sort of front cover, which on the back has this, again, the list and the kind of numbers for the people that are on the front. But of course, the description of this is not included in here, so the numbers are kind of pointless at this point. I mean, if you don't have like the full edition with all of the inserts and everything, it's kind of pointless. But the disc, as you can see it, with this orange print over the style of the CDs from the 80s, right, and then early 90s maybe even, and the back, which is the track listing. So pretty standard 1987 issue of Sgt. Pepper. Next, we have the 2009 Digipack Stereo Remaster of Sgt. Pepper with, you know, the outer border here, the red border here, which makes this one look a little slightly better than other of some other of these Digipacks of the stereo albums. This was, of course, part of the stereo collection, remasters of 2009, but it was also sold separately as a separate sort of CD with the Digipack, as were the other albums of that series. This, of course, the Digipack is opening up. You still have a variation of the picture from the original album here, and the original one as well. The back, again with the track listing, and this another variation of the Beatles super overimposed on the back there. And of course, here in the pocket with the green apple, you have the booklet. You can take a look at this as well again. You can see it on the channel on one of the earlier videos where we looked at the entire stereo box set. But you know, it's a pretty nice booklet, as was included with all of the Digipacks of the 2009 remasters. Let's take a look at the disc as well. The replica of the Parlophone yellow and black label with the track listing mentioned, and of course we also have the mention of this being an enhanced CD and the QuickTime logo here on the right, because as with the other Digipacks of this collection of the 2009 stereo remasters, this contains that mini documentary on the same disc as the album itself. Next, we have the sort of crown jewel of the Beatles Sgt. Pepper CDs, which is the 2009 mono edition from the mono box set. As you can see, well, I'm going to take the disc out already, otherwise it's going to jump out. As you can see, it is again a fold out, a nice replica of the original album in mono. You know, full glossy finish with the picture inside included, right? It does include as well a mini replica, beautiful mini replica of the original inner sleeve. It does include also a mini replica of the cutouts. Pretty darn nice. And then, of course, the disc in this sort of poly inner Japanese style sleeve, again with the yellow and black Parlophone label replica. But of course, as opposed to the vinyl records, this also has the track listing, but it does look quite nice. The print is quite nice. And finally, when we talk about CDs, we cannot ignore the CDs from the Beatles Sgt. Pepper Anniversary Deluxe, Super Deluxe Edition of Sgt. Pepper from 2017, which is again that one over there. I showed this on the channel before. There's an older video, I think, from the beginning of the channel. You can check that out. I'll link it in the description as well, where you can see all of the contents, the book, and so on. These are two of the discs included in there. You have here the mono version of it, the mono version of the album. Now, the mono version of the album, and I'll try to show this to you as well. I hope it will be visible. Yeah, it contains also some bonus tracks. So you have the mono version, again, as you would for the 2009 CD. And then it contains, I think there are 6 bonus tracks. Yeah, we have Strawberry Fields Forever and the Penny Lane, both in the original mono mix. You have A Day in the Life, the first mono mix. You have Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the original mono mix, and number 11. You have She's Leaving Home, the first mono mix, and you have Penny Lane, the Capitol Records mono US promo mix. So, hoping you'll be able to see this. Also interesting, and again you can see that in the video that I presented this box set in, these CDs from that box set, and these are not the only two, there are more discs in there, right, with the all of the sort of rehearsals and recording sessions, where they used a different variations of the picture used for the final album, and as you can see with the Beatles in different positions, and so that's quite interesting and nice. Otherwise, the packaging is very flimsy cardboard. I mentioned it at the time. I'm just going to take on one of the discs because most of them kind of look the same, because we again have the yellow on black Parlophone label. The other of the two discs is the stereo mix, and this is actually the one that I was just showing you. So the CD version of the 2017 stereo mix by Giles Martin. Pretty good mix. Worth mentioning that this was also sold separately in a digipack form as a separate CD as of 2017. This about does it with the CDs as well. Before we close this showcase, I have one last item that I wanted to look at briefly, which is this cassette of Sgt. Pepper. Again, not an original issue of the album from the UK or any country. This is a Polish label, Polish semi-pirate label from the 90s. They issued a full catalog of Beatles albums called the Beatles Collection. They are not in order, so the Beatles collection that they built with volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was not in the order of the initial releases or any kind of order like that. For instance, Sgt. Pepper is volume 11, and you can see some more pieces of that collection. I mentioned this also on the channel before because one of these, Rubber Soul, was the first cassette of the Beatles that I ever purchased myself in the 90s. It was all I could find and afford, but it kept me through the Beatles, with the Beatles, for a few years. So yeah, I found more of them from that collection. I wanted to buy them also because they're kind of an interesting collection. They were, like with these volumes being out of order, but also the way that they presented them. They created these custom covers with sort of the gold sort of background, and then they have special fonts and colors for each album. As you can see, even the spines are quite interesting. I'm just going to take this out actually so you can see the J card better, right? But I think they did a pretty nice job with the presentation of it, right? Unfortunately, sound is not on par, right? Cassettes are not stamped. Obviously, they didn't have any kind of rights to distribute this music. It's also interesting, as it was with Rubber Soul and others that I have mentioned, and I will mention the others that I have as well in the future videos, is that they are kind of screwing up the track listing. And it's not just that they are putting the songs in different orders, because this was kind of happening with cassettes sometimes because of the need to fit within a time for each side of a cassette, but they're actually screwing up the titles. But anyway, the order that they have it is slightly different, and you will see why. We have Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band with a little help from my friends and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds starting the album, so that's just like the regular album. We have Getting Better, She's Leaving Home, and then you end with Lovely Rita. So the first side ends with Lovely Rita instead of being For the Benefit of Mr. Kite, which starts side B. Then you have Within You, Without You, When I'm 64, Good Morning, Good Morning, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and A Day in the Life. Now, I know what you are going to ask yourself. There seems like is a track missing. So the titles are correct, but when you look at the first side, you see them jumping from track 3, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, to track 5, Getting Better, and Where Is Fixing a Hole. It is on the cassette, it was just not printed on the J card. So yeah, this was the last part of the showcase. Let's talk a little bit next about sound. Now, talking about sound, obviously this cassette will be out of the discussion. It's not even worth comparing. Also, this time I can say that the record from the Beatles box from Liverpool, so the 6th record, again does not disappoint. The sound is excellent, but again, as most of the records in this collection, because of the cramming of a big number of tracks on each side, is a little bit bass shy. If you have a system where you can crank up the bass just a little bit, it will probably do just fine. And the quality of the sound, the clarity of the sound is really, really good. And obviously this is using the original stereo mix of the album. As we will talk about stereo versus mono and stereo mixes between themselves, we will see that, at least for me, it's very difficult to choose a definitive version of it. It feels like all of them have their own benefits, but sometimes for some songs, preferences might switch from one version of the album to another. This being said, I have to say that for the stereo mix, I like the new stereo mix by Giles Martin. I feel it's good, especially when listening to a good system. It sounds really nice, and it's really well done and thoughtfully done, it seems. Even though it was done right in 2017, when the technology that they have now for doing even better mixes did not exist. However, I still feel, and this might be just like because I was used to listening to these songs in the original stereo mix, I might be a little bit partial to the original stereo mix. I feel like I'm more used to it, although there are things in it that still were jarring. I think like as of kind of this album, they started to make better and better stereo mixes of the Beatles albums, which is I think also why they transitioned near the end of the 60s to just mixing in stereo. There are a few things in here that are interesting as a stereo mix, and the songs that I listened to intently to compare a little bit, this time were just 3. I wanted to keep the video shorter than usual. I don't know if I'll be able to. One of them is With a Little Help from My Friends, and this is one thing that I actually noticed on other albums as well, on Rubber Soul and on Help with Act Naturally. I feel like Ringo's songs just like sonically sound very good and crisp and clear. I don't know if this is just me, but it seems sometimes like compared to some of the other songs that are like right against them on the records, they're just like bumping and pumping, and the sound is very clear, or clearer than for some of the other songs that they have on the exact same albums. So maybe it's just me, but I chose this one because I feel like the sound is very, very good for it. And it's like you can clearly compare. And then the other one, the second one, is She's Leaving Home, which is a favorite of mine, but also quite a nice song, involving the strings as well, which is makes for a more interesting listen and an interesting comparison, I thought. And the last one was A Day in the Life, because it also has some very specifics to it that kind of lended to this kind of comparison, or at least this is how I felt. So I compare them. Overall, I can just say that when it comes to stereo mixes and the original stereo mix and the record that I have, as well as the CDs, which included the original stereo mix, which is of course the 1987 CD, as well as the 2009 remaster, I didn't notice huge differences. So I feel like both these issues of Sgt. Pepper, the 87 CD and the 2009 CD, did a pretty good job at reflecting accurately or like authentically the sound and the original stereo mix that at least I have on this 1980 record. There are of course some differences. You start to feel like as the decades go on, the small bump in volume with each CD release. I don't feel like, I know if there's a wall of sound. I don't do like spectrogram analysis and stuff. Other people can do that and do it very well, actually, for all of us to actually have this information. I don't know if they used wall of sound on the most recent CDs. What I can say is the volume definitely gets bigger as you move on with the releases through the decades. And the other thing is sometimes maybe it's just also because of the volume, but they seem to get more bassy as you move along. Maybe that was just me. But there were other things that I noticed, which I will get to in a couple of minutes, specifically for the songs. When it comes to the mono versions of the album, it is kind of similar, which is like the 1982 Japanese mono version does sound quite close to the CD reissues in mono for 2014 and 2017 in the box sets. And those two CDs also are very, very similar. The differences might be there, but at least listening in speakers, I almost could not notice them. So yeah, this is like generally speaking about them. Of course, between mono and stereo, there are some differences, especially in some of the songs, not to mention the mix itself, right? But in some of the songs, the differences are more present, and She's Leaving Home is one example of that, which we will talk about in a few moments. So I mentioned With a Little Help from My Friends. Again, I feel like in the stereo department for the original mix, I didn't see much of a difference. I didn't hear much of a difference from the original record from the 1980 stereo pressing to the CDs 87, 2009. Again, just a matter of volume, and the newer ones seem a little bit bumpier, a little bit more low end, but that's about it. Not much of a difference there. For the 2017 new mix, I feel like there's a little bit stronger separation in some portions of the track. The track is not very long, and I'll feel like the vocals are a little bit closer now in the way that I listen to it, especially when you put on headphones. You know, sometimes for some of these songs and new mixes, you will feel when you have the headphones on that the voice that you hear is not in the same place, right? Sometimes it's more in front of you, sometimes it feels like it's at the back of you, sometimes like on the top of your head or in the middle, or at least this is how I feel. And this was like pointed out to me by a friend when we were kind of comparing some mixes together on, you know, listening through our phone and headphones, but still. So yeah, for this one, the vocals just seem a little bit more, you know, closer to the listener, especially when you listen in headphones. Same goes for the mono mix, which I feel has the vocals closer, and that's why I feel like maybe the 2017 mix, and this is actually true for other songs as well, was trying to be still a stereo mix, but closer in spirit to the original mono. And I guess that's why vocals seem that way, because that's how they seem to me in the mono mix as well. And the other thing with the mono mix is just like I feel like there's just a little bit less reverb than you can hear in the stereo, and that everything obviously seems a little bit more centered, but again, it's a mono mix, so no surprise there. For She's Leaving Home, we're going to start with the original stereo mix, and this one is going to be one where it's important to distinguish between the original stereo mix and the new stereo mix as well. The original stereo mix on the vinyl record from the 1980s compared to the CD from 87, 2009, again, very similar. The volume increases a little bit. The 2009 one seems to have just a tad more reverb, but maybe that was just me. But what is important here is to compare between the original stereo mix and the new stereo mix of 2017 by Giles Martin. And this goes back to actually the original mono mix of She's Leaving Home, because the recording for the mono mix was sped up a little bit. People say it was to make Paul's voice sound younger. It's quite young, fine, but obviously it would, like, probably they thought it would fit better with the mood of the song as well, but it was apparently intentional. So the mono mix always will have, or up until recently compared to the stereo, it was always sped up, because for the stereo they did not do that. They just put the recording as in its normal tempo on the record when they pressed it the first time, and then when they repressed it years later. So up until the 2009 remaster, includingly, we had a version in stereo of She's Leaving Home with a, like, say, normal tempo, but that was, you know, audibly slower than the tempo of the mono mix. So that would be, you know, when listening to it, it's quite jarring when listening to the comparison. A lot of people did not know this or notice it, because a lot of people started with the mono and maybe they continued to listen to the mono version for years. Those people who had both the mono and the stereo could compare, and they knew. The ones that had only stereo and that had listened to this only stereo, especially generations like myself, which only had access to the CD versions for a long time, I got used to the original stereo mix with a lower tempo. So with a slower tempo, and so that for me was the benchmark, right? Whereas for people who had listened to the mono initially and started with that, that was their benchmark. It is quite jarring to compare them. I think it is more jarring when you put them side by side, like immediately. If I'm listening to the stereo version, the original stereo version of She's Leaving Home now, and I take a break of a couple of days or a few hours or whatever, and I put on the mono, I won't feel the difference that much. But if I put them side by side, like listening to them one after the other, I will definitely feel it. And when moving, like listening to the mono first and then moving to the stereo immediately, it sounds weird. It sounds like it's slowed down, when in fact the normal pitch is the one of the stereo, right? At the same time, if I'm putting the stereo first, the original stereo, and then I'm putting on the original mono, it seems like the mono is unnaturally sped up. So yeah, the difference for the 2017 mix is that Giles wanted to replicate the initial intention that was used on the mono album, which is he remixed the song and also sped it up to the tempo that it needed to be to compare with the mono. And so the new stereo mix as of 2017, and what most people will buy if they buy a new Beatles Sgt. Pepper record, will be similar to the mono mix in that regard. Which one I like best? It's difficult to say. I mean, to me, first of all, they both sound excellent. I like it in both versions. I feel like both of them have their own, I don't know, benefits and how they sound. For the stereo, I'm more used to it, the original stereo, so I'll probably have this preference somewhere inside because of that. But I do see the benefit and the concept behind the mono being sped up and the new stereo mix in that sense. So yeah, it's very difficult to choose, but the difference is quite clear. A couple of other things about this comparison between the original stereo and the new stereo. First of all, the mono mix is excellent, so for that one, it's not much to say. It's just one excellent mix of this song. I do feel like in the stereo department, like the vocals were slightly clearer in the original stereo mix versus the 2017 one, slightly. And also, the other thing that is very noticeable, at least when you're listening in headphones for the new stereo mix, is again, and this is true for any kind of more recent mixes, is again, they are bumping up the volume a little bit and the bass and the low end. And in this case, the double bass, which is one of the string instruments used on the recording the song, when you listen in headphones, at least when I listen in headphones to the new stereo mix, it's quite powerful, and sometimes it covers many of the other things around it. It's nice. It's a nice feeling because the double bass, counter bass, how we call it in Romania at least. It's a very special instrument. It's a string instrument, but it's so deep versus violas and violins and such. And it does feel like it just grabs you when you listen to it. But at the same time, sometimes it can be a little bit distracting, or at least it was for me. Now, the last song that I wanted to mention is A Day in the Life. Here, I mean, all of the things that I said before that are general about the albums are still fitting. I think there were just a couple of things that I wanted to say. So I kind of prefer the original mono mix and the new stereo mix more than the original stereo. There's just a few reasons, but the main one is that when I'm listening in headphones on the original stereo mix, there is this transition of John's vocals from one side to the other. I think from right to left, if I remember correctly. So his vocals at the beginning of the song start in the right ear, and then they migrate slowly as he moves on to the second verse to your left ear. I understand it because it's like stereo was still kind of gimmicky in the late 1960s, or like the second half of the 1960s. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like it was intended, but I'm not sure how intended it was to actually create a very special effect. And why would you intend this when the original mono mix was the definitive one, at least at that time? So anyway, it was just a choice, a stylistic choice, I think, and it is interesting. But to be honest, centered vocals, like the main vocals of a song being centered, if the song is not like super trippy, like something off the Magical Mystery Tour or something, it does seem to me like it's preferable to have the vocals centered. When you have backing vocals, or you have choirs in the background, or support, or like harmonies happening, those ones I understand for them to kind of move around to create like this atmosphere of different groups of people singing. But the main vocals to me just sound better centered in this song. So that's why I think here I would prefer the new stereo mix or the mono mix of that song. There's another point that I noticed, which I know you guys let me know in the comments if you noticed this as well. So in the records from before the last couple of decades, so like the 80s, but also like the late 60s records like I had with Sgt. Pepper, it seemed to me, and this is also true partially for this 1982 mono version of Sgt. Pepper from Japan. In the middle of the song, you of course have Paul's version, sort of portion of vocals. And to me, on these older records, and to a certain extent even the old CDs from the 1987, this portion sounds slightly muffled. So it's not covered completely, but it is comparable to John's vocals, and of course they record it separately or whatever, and maybe they use different takes. All of that can cause this kind of differences when you are listening to a song. But to me, just those versions have this, where it's slightly muffled, especially when compared to John's vocals. Then on the newer record, 2017 new mix, and the mono mix that I have on the CDs, it sounds clearer. So I don't know if it's like a vinyl issue, although again I could kind of feel it a little bit on the 87 CD as well, or it was something in the mix. But yeah, that's one thing that I noticed. You guys let me know if you noticed something like that. Maybe it's just me, or I was kind of unlucky with like the older vinyl, 80s, 60s. Maybe I got some that was so played that maybe that's why Paul's voice seemed a little bit muffled. Okay, so this concludes our look through some variations of the Sgt. Pepper album. To me, this wasn't my favorite Beatles album. Of course, it depends for everybody, because it depends on what you've heard first of the Beatles, how many songs you've got a chance to listen to in your early years of listening to the Beatles, you know, how much time you spend listening to a certain album or another, and that kind of builds your favorites. This one for me was not my number one, but it has become one of my favorite albums in the last few years, listening to it more. And actually, She's Leaving Home has become one of my favorite tracks ever, not just of the Beatles. So yeah, I've come to love this more, and I fully still understand the impact that it had on the music scene, impact that it had on young people, or actually people of all ages, because this one was appealing to multiple generations when it first came out in 1967, as opposed to maybe earlier Beatles records, right, which were more targeted for teenagers and such. So, and it still remained one of the staples of pop rock music, and of music, I think, in general, as of the 20th century onwards. Now, in terms of my favorite version of the album, like I said, this is one that I'm finding difficulties to choose a preference. I like all of them, to be honest. I have a slight preference for the original stereo mix, mostly overall, just because it was the one that I've listened to the most up until recent years. I've come to appreciate a lot the mono mix. It is excellent, and probably the new stereo mix by Giles Martin will come in very close third, just because of the reasons I've mentioned already. Well, this was about it for today. I want to thank you again very much for watching these videos, for liking them, for subscribing to the channel, for sharing them with other people as well. Again, I do appreciate every person that is taking time to watch these and maybe comment or like interact. We've had recently people joining the channel and giving very interesting information to fill in many of the gaps that I might leave during the videos. So that's also appreciated. If in the next few weeks, I hope I have the chance to at least record one more follow-up video to the best or most influential records ever, because I have an increasing list of records that I got from that you know, kind of pool of best albums ever. So I hope I have a chance to actually record that as well. Thank you again very much for watching, and I hope I'll see you next time.